Hello everyone, and welcome back to Warships Blitz with Terry. Today we'll be taking a closer look at the Colorado, the Tier 7 American battleship. We've already done her as part of the Road to Montana series, but again it was my first time playing this ship because that's kind of how this series works. And I wasn't super impressed at the beginning, but you know, when you're not super impressed, it's always a good time to take a closer look at what we're dealing with. So, the Colorado, as mentioned in my previous video, the Colorado was built as a reaction to the Nagato, the Japanese Tier 7 battleship, which was having 410mm main guns. Well, the Japanese said they were 400mm because the naval treaty prevented them from actually having anything larger than 406mm, but in effect they were 410mm guns. So the Colorado has also big guns. Although the Americans actually adhered to the treaty, she gets the 16-inch or 406mm 45 caliber main gun. These things were developed just after during and just after the First World War, and they had been modernized a little bit in the 1930s. So she doesn't get the Mark I guns; she gets the Mark Vs, I think. These are the 1930s with a bigger chamber, so she can carry a bit larger charge and can fire heavier shells. The shells are 1020 kilos, which I think is about the same weight as what the Japanese are firing. She does fire with a slightly lower muzzle velocity, at least the historical one. It's 770 meters per second for the Colorado, and I think it's 790 for the Nagato. So what are these guns like? Well, as we've established in my first video, and experience proves that the accuracy on these things is not great. So I've been struggling a little bit with the Colorado initially, because at long range it's really, really difficult to actually hit anything. And from what I've seen at least, the gun angle, the gun arcs, and just the shells themselves don't also have the greatest penetration at range. So ranges like 8-9 kilometers, she's really struggling to do something. Whereas the higher flying heavy Japanese shells coming in from the top can do quite a bit more of serious damage at long ranges. The Colorado's ideal range is mid-range to short range, which is a little difficult because you are in a ship which still adheres to the standard battleship settings, and that means she's got a speed of 21 knots, which isn't much. But let's take a look at the Colorado's armor scheme. Now, as is typical for the American standard battleships, they were evolutions of their preceding types. And the Colorado, at least, she's not the direct successor of the New Mexico class, but they are rather similar. So the Colorado gets a belt armor of 410mm, and apparently the Americans liked matching these. So if you have 410mm gun caliber, you get around about 400mm belt armor. She has an all-or-nothing armor scheme, so the bow and stern are very, very lightly armored with only 25mm, which means that the heavy shells are easily going to overpenetrate. The deck armor on the Colorado is not hugely great. I am, of course, not sure because we don't have these values, so this is all theory. But the refitted Colorado, the historic one, had a deck armor of a maximum of 163mm, and at some spaces it was less than that. The initial build of the Colorado class actually, I think, had less armor than that. So this is not a huge amount of deck armor, which makes her somewhat susceptible to long-range plunging fire. But on the side, she is an extremely sturdy ship, and which also again makes her quite practical at mid-range, because she can dish out more damage, and she can, she can take it. So let's have a quick look at how a Colorado kind of differs or plays up against the New Mexico. So there's a New Mexico for us to shoot at. We're shooting at, let's see, what range are we getting into? That's about 6.5 kilometers. And there we go, double citadel. So let's look at these shots a little bit closer. Here we see, we're going to hit with 5 shells out of this 8 shell salvo. And here we see, well, the shells just before they're impacting. It's a little tricky to spot the exact point of impact, but I'm doing what I can with just frame by frame investigations here. So here we see the shells that are actually going to hit. The one shell that went wide and is going to hit the forward, it's going to hit the bow section. The one in circled in yellow here is probably going to overpenetrate, but we've got 5 shells that are hitting either around the A and B turret or just behind the turret near the superstructure. Now the New Mexico has a 343 millimeter waterline belt. Again, we don't know how detailed the armor models are in Blitz. It could be that it's literally just the whole section modeled like this, or it could be that it's more detailed where the underwater belt is somewhat lessened than that. And there's an upper belt section which is also having different values, all these kind of things. But the New Mexico definitely has a weaker armor than the Colorado. So on the belt section, which we're just going to assume is the side section. So let's see what happens when we actually hit there. So again, here we can see one shell explodes on the bow section. There are 2 shells, 2 shells that are relatively close to the barbettes where the powder magazines are, and there are, I think, 2 shells or 3 shells which are hitting the midsection. And that's where we're going. That's where we're seeing the penetrations. So we have two Citadel hits. We don't know which of these shells actually caused the Citadel hits. We can guess. So I would say we may have hit 2 through the deck armor, or we might. I don't think we've managed to penetrate the main belt, but we've definitely been able to get through to the Citadel. Could be one in the powder magazine as well. We definitely see that we've got one semi-pen. I would assume that that's the one that hit the main belt. We've got one full penetration, and we've got the 381, that's an over penetration. So that's the bow section where we hit. That just went straight through because 25 millimeters of plating are not going to arm the 406 millimeter shell at this distance. So we're getting a bit closer. So this kind of range, right? So 5 to maybe 7 kilometers. That's kind of the ideal range. You see, I'm aiming slightly higher. Aiming is really tricky with the Colorado. And there we see a couple more shots landing, but this time we don't get a Citadel. So let's take a look at these shots. We have hit pretty much all of it. There we see one shot hitting the A turret, and we're seeing a couple of shots that are probably over penetrating. So one of them hits the superstructure, and I don't know if the conning towers are modeled because these tend to be very heavily armored, but I would expect that to over penetrate, and the 2 shots again that hit the bow section are probably going to over penetrate, and one of them seems to have hit one of the turrets. And this is the effect that we have, right? We have 3 over penetrations. I would assume 2 of them in the bow section, 1 of them in the superstructure. We have 3 full penetrations, and we have 2 semi-pens. Again, it's really, really tricky to see where these shells actually have hit. The turret sides of the New Mexico are not as heavily armored as the belt armor. So it's entirely possible that one of the turret hits was a full penetration, which would also explain why they've lost the turret. Because I think, if I can see this correctly, the New Mexico here lost both forward turrets from this salvo. So it's entirely possible that these were the 2 full penetrations, and that we've hit the semi-pens into the main belt and the overpens into the superstructure and into the forward section. So here we've got a little different target. This is Ryujo, and we're firing at long range, so about 11 kilometers. We actually got really lucky with the dispersion here, that we actually landed 4 shots on target. At these ranges, it's a bit of a dice throw, really, with these guns. The Ryujo shouldn't have any armor whatsoever. That said, she has 2 flight decks, and she's a relatively big ship. So there's a given amount of steel that the shells travel through, which may end up arming this thing. But it's tricky to tell. I have no idea how carriers are modeled in Warships Blitz, given that historically most of them were not really super well armored. I've checked the Ryujo don't think the Ryujo had an armored flight deck. But what's really interesting to see is that, well, even though these are plunging shots, we've got 3 full pens and a Citadel coming more or less from the top. The gun arcs aren't the highest, so you're not getting the super straight down sort of arcs. But yeah, I think in the PC version, the Ryujo is labeled with 30 millimeters of armor, which is barely more than the overpenetrations we had at the New Mexico at the 25 millimeter bow section. So it could be that carriers are modeled differently, or that there's some form of internal structure that counts towards arming the shells. But at long range, also, again, we're firing at over 10 kilometers here, the shells have less penetrating power, so it's possible that we're not over-penetrating because we are actually firing at long range. We'll have to try that out at much shorter ranges. So how about if you fight the Nagato, the actual nemesis of the Colorado and the reason she existed? So the Nagato has a belt of 305 millimeters. She has a turret size of 280 and a deck armor of 207. So her belt armor is actually weaker than the Colorado's, but her deck armor is better. And again, at these kind of ranges, we can Citadel. How about the New Orleans, a cruiser? Yeah, so the New Orleans, we can shoot straight through the belt armor and just Citadel right at this kind of distance, can just Citadel right through the side. At longer ranges, again, I have had trouble with cruisers as well, but at mid to close range, we can very, very reliably punish cruisers. Now, the New Orleans has, I think I'm going to have to look that up. I think she's got like 127 or 130 millimeter of side armor. So here we're seeing that we got full pens, we've got citadels, but we're not over penetrating. So the shells are not powerful enough to punch clean through the ship, but with something like with this kind of values, they're very happy to explode inside. Now, how about the Colorado herself if we shoot at her with this ship? Now, I'm aiming again a little bit higher and trying to hit the deck from here, but it's tricky because, again, of the dispersion and the shotgun nature of the ship. We're shooting at around about 6 to 7 kilometers here, and we're doing semi-pens and a couple full pens, but we're not getting a citadel, and we're not really bouncing off the armor. So they definitely have enough punch to do damage, even if they're hitting the main belt, but they're usually going to do semi-pens. They're not easily punching through. So again, here we see it. We've got three semi-pens, 2 full pens. The full pens might have been able to hit a bit higher, and the semi-pens probably hit the belt. Again, it's really, really difficult to tell, even if you look frame by frame on where you actually hit. Even if we get a bit closer and get to under 5 kilometers, see if we can do something here. I'm going to try and hit the waterline and see if we can actually punch through anything. But again, we're seeing the semi-pens where we're hitting the belt and the full pens where we're aiming higher. So you definitely want to not shoot the belt armor of the Colorado, because these 410 millimeters of armor are really, really tricky to get through. Her weakness more is the deck armor. So you want to aim higher. And even then, at short range, it's not guaranteed. Plunging fire is a lot more effective at this to get through. The Colorado is a brawler. She's a very sturdy ship. Now, how about if we shoot at the Nagato? And we're trying to try this at slightly longer range. Again, the Nagato has a belt of 305 millimeters and a deck of 207. So we're doing full pens, we're doing some semi-pens, but at this range of over 8 kilometers and then up to 10, 12 kilometers, it's actually relatively tricky to get through the Japanese deck armor. If you're getting much closer, then of course you can actually punish the sides much easier. But with plunging fire against this Japanese ship, it's actually a little bit more tricky. And again, here we see where the shells are hitting. They are exploding on the turrets, they are exploding on the superstructure, but we're getting semi-pens and some full pens, and we're managing to overpen something as well somewhere. So, armed with that knowledge, let's go and see what we can do. We're a bottom tier in Golden Channel. There's a carrier in the game, a Nagato and a Colorado, 2 Nagatos and a Colorado on the enemy team, and a couple of cruisers that we can hurt. So, in summary, the Colorado, extremely good belt armor, somewhat questionable deck armor, so you don't really want to be taking long range plunging fire. Plus, her guns are also not the most accurate at long range. She's a bit more of a mid-range ship. So given that she's not the fastest, you really just want to get yourself into positions where you can tank, because that's kind of what this thing is really good at. and where you're going to see enemies at these close to mid-ranges. Now, on Golden Channel, well, the perfect place for that is, well, in the cap circle. Let's go and see how this turns out. This is really a ship that you can get into the cap with. And you can, well, you can tank some, not long-range fire really that well, but if it comes to brawling situations, and I have set up my Colorado, I've changed my Colorado setup to be a secondary spec, so I do have the secondary reload module in there. And she does have a blistering array of secondaries. They're not doing a great deal of damage, but if you have to deal with torpedoes and short-range things and destroyers, they're actually pretty good. Okay, so the Charles Martel on our side seems to be undecided if he wants to do a flanking run. He's probably going to get the loving attention of the Ark Royal here. And does he decide where he wants to go? He should have stuck a little bit closer to me. I could have given a bit more AA support. I mean, I'm no AA cruiser, but this is a French cruiser. I don't know how much AA that thing has. And yeah, the Ark Royal is definitely trying to drop the Charles Martel here, and he's circling wildly, which means he's not going into the cap circle. And our team seems to be somewhat... No, actually no. The carrier does not drop the Ark Royal. The carrier just flies around over it and goes somewhere else. Okay, so our team seems to have little interest in the cap circle. And there's a Benson. I'm not going to waste a shot on the Benson. I'm not really sure. I'm pretty sure I can't hit him. And if I'm going to hit him, it's going to be one overpen or something. And I should be in range of something more interesting in a second. Like, but if somebody could kill that Benson, that'd be great. Okay, what do we have there? There's a broadsiding Nagato, long range. It's the Ark Royal. Maybe we can dissuade the Ark Royal from getting this close. Let's give him a shot and see where this goes. Okay, salvo out. There's an Atlanta flanking on the left side. But he seems to be going the wrong way around, so I'm not going to worry about him right now. Okay, that's with some semi-pens and some full pens on the Ark Royal. And that should teach him to bugger off. Okay, so that's a bot Amagi there in the cap. He's going to die. That's a bot Nagato over there. But I've got broadsiding Nagato at this range. But then again, at this range, I'm usually not doing the greatest amount of damage against Japanese ships. And yeah, there we go. But that Algerie, that looks much more juicy. So let's see if we can... We're holding the cap. All our team is going around the side except for the destroyer. So well done on that Kagero. I think it was a Kagero. Okay, broadsiding Algerie, 10 kilometers. Let's see what we can do. Again, this is not the ideal range for the Colorado. And yeah, we've got an overpen. We've got 2 semis. Okay, now we get some air attention by the looks of it. And still we're just sitting in the cap circle, trying to hold it and trying to hold this flank on our own. There's the Algerie again, another salvo out at him. Okay, I'm reversing now because I'm going to try and throw the torpedoes off a little bit. But these are Ark Royal torpedoes. I don't think they're doing that much amount of damage. So I'm just going to heal. There is no flooding. Okay. And where's the Algerie going? Is he going to try and torp me? Is he going to go the long way around, trying to outflank me? So I'm going to get forward and back into the cap circle just to be in position. Is he going to try and go for a flanking run? No, he turns in. I think he's going to try and rush me. Now this is a distance that I'm comfortable with. This is the ideal distance for Colorado. Okay, I'm jumping the shark a little bit here, I think, because this was not a good shot. This was too close. This was too angled. This would have been the ideal shot. I could have blapped him so hard here. Okay, he's probably going to get torpedoes away because he's not even shooting at me. Oh, there he shoots. So torpedoes are in the water. I'm just reversing and see if I can do some damage to him from there. Yes, that's much more like it. 4 citadels. 5 kilometers, ideal range for Colorado guns. You've seen what I've done to him at long range. Not much. Okay, there comes some Atlanta torps. Hello. Yeah, I know. Everyone's got torps in the water. Probably going to take a couple of those. That's fine. That's what I've saved my damage con up for. Atlanta is going to try and set me on fire, of course. But he can't set me on fire while my damage con's active, I think. And he's managed to sail out of his smoke. Now, can I do something to him? Broadsiding Atlanta, 6 kilometers. That would be neat. But I think my shots are going everywhere. I think that was 2 full pens by the looks of it. But we're still holding here. Okay, there's got to be more Atlanta torps in the water. So I'm going to try and turn a little bit. I want this Atlanta blapped if I can. I'm just trying to get him Come on, give me that nice flat broadside. Okay, any luck? No. That was a good set of full pens, but by all rights and purposes I should have deleted him there. Anyway, it means I'm gonna probably take his 2 torpedoes, but I did enough damage to him to actually get rid of him. And there's another Colorado. So yes, sturdy ship. At this range, I am probably not gonna do a huge amount of damage. The battle is won. I'm on low health, so if he wants to kill me, he can kill me. But look at this. I'm almost broadsiding, 7-kilometer range, and he's not doing a huge amount of damage to me. There was a couple of maybe 1-2 fulls and a couple of semi-pens. Just going to give him another shot. With the next salvo, he can probably sink me, but I'm also not doing a huge amount of damage on him at this distance. Even at closer range against the Colorado, it would be very tricky for me to do damage. Yep, there he goes. You're not going to citadel that thing that easily this close. But at longer ranges, with plunging fire, especially with something with some high arcs like the Japanese plunging, or even with the Colorado shells, you can do significantly more damage. The problem is with the Colorado, you can't really hit at long ranges. But that's the Colorado. It's a tank. It's very difficult to damage at mid range. The deck is relatively weak, so if you're coming under long-range plunging fire, you want to try and get a bit closer. But if you can get yourself into positions where you can fire at 5, 6, 7 kilometers, and you have good targets to hit, these 406mm shells can severely punish cruisers and other battleships as well. Not sure with higher tiers, haven't tried anything against anything tier 8, but tier 7 is a bit of this awkward tier always, that you're very strong in tier 6 games, but you might not be that strong in tier 8 games. But yeah, the Colorado. She is still relatively slow, but get yourself into a position and then hold that position and tank for your team, because you are relatively difficult to damage and you can take a severe amount of punishment before you're going down. And you can, at brawling ranges, you can dish out beautifully. So, I hope that little bit of research made things a little bit more clear. And that was it for today. I'll see you all next time. Bye.